Hi, my name is Susan Angel Miller. I am a donor mom, and I really appreciate transplant families for having me on today to talk to all of you. I know that recipient stories, transplant recipient stories, are often more common than donor family stories, probably for good reason. And I really appreciate the opportunity to tell the story of our family story, of my daughter Laura's story, because it helps keep her memory alive, it honors her life, and it tells a story that isn't often told. So I'll just start right away. In 2009, almost 17 years ago, this month in January, our daughter Laura, uh, who was a freshman in high school, started having headaches. But teenagers, 14-year-olds often have headaches, and we didn't worry too much. Gave her some Tylenol, and the headaches unfortunately continued. A couple weeks later, in mid-February, she had slept in my bed because she had been complaining still about the headaches and neck pain. And she woke up that morning, and um, she'd been in school the day before, and she woke up. She threw up several times. She asked me why I had four eyes, and she had a seizure in our hallway upstairs, all within about an hour. It was a normal school day. And we immediately called 911. They came, the paramedics came, they revived her. Went to the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, where they gave her a CT scan, and they a doctor came in and told me that she had a mass at the back of her head. And I couldn't believe that was happening because we had always been a family of three daughters who, and my husband, we always followed the rules. We did everything we thought we were supposed to be doing. And this was just shocking news, but I thought, okay, it's going to be benign, it's going to be removed, and she's going to be fine, and our family's going to go on as usual. Well, so later that afternoon, the surgeon told us that the tumor could be removed in 2 days when the operating room became available on that Friday. Um, but later that evening, when we were in the room with her, in the normal hospital room with her, she continued complaining about the headaches, and all of a sudden, she stopped breathing. And they rushed her down to the OR where they inserted a shunt to relieve the pressure in her brain. But when the doctor came out, he told us the procedure went okay, but she wasn't responding the way they would like. So the next thing we knew, we were up in the ICU room where Laura was attached to every machine and beeping tube, and I just knew as a mom that it was really, really serious, and I could just feel her absence. Um, and so for the next 3 days, we were at the hospital waiting for her to, uh, come back to us. But the doctors weren't telling us much. And on that Saturday, February 21st, they did a final MRI, and the brain surgeon told us that she had a irreversible brain bleed from the brain tumor and that it wasn't survivable. And it was kind of a surreal moment. As you guys can imagine, it was just shocking because she had been in school on that Tuesday complaining about headaches, but doing her Spanish and math homework. And here it was just Saturday, and we were told that our daughter wouldn't survive a cancerous brain tumor. We hadn't even had an oncologist relationship before this. She hadn't spent a day in the hospital since being born. So we went up to the family waiting room where our family was gathered, and we told them the news. And then it wasn't more than an hour later that I remember a woman in a white, like nurse's coat came and asked us. She introduced herself as Emily from the Wisconsin Organ Donor Network, and she gave us our first condolences, which was really shocking because I couldn't. I didn't understand why she was saying she was sorry about Laura. It was like a weird a disconnect. It was the first time that we would hear condolences, and then she asked whether we would be willing to donate Laura's organs in order to save um, up to 7 lives and help and improve the lives of many others. And I remember my husband Ron and I, looking at each other in kind of disbelief, not really knowing how to respond because, I mean, we had known about organ donation. We had always thought it was a really um, noble and generous concept, but in the abstract, not a concept that we ever thought we would have to decide for someone in our family, let alone our oldest, special, beautiful 14-year-old daughter. That was for other people. We felt like we were protected as a family from really all the bad things happening. Those were the stories that happened on the newscasts. Those didn't affect us. And how could we make this type of a decision? And there was all sorts of things rushing through my mind. What happened when you die? And it really became a very practical thought in my head at this point because we're Jewish. Um, Judaism believes certain things about what happens after you die, but then there's Christianity and there's Islam and there's all sorts of religions, and no one really knows what happens after you die. And my question as a mom was, would Laura need her organs? And it was like the craziest thought, but I felt like I really needed to know in order to make that decision. And then we turned to our rabbi who had been sitting in the corner silent, listening to all this conversation. And we turned to him and asked him what Judaism believed about organ donation. And he said, well, according to the philosopher Maimonides, if you save one life, you save a world. And so that gave us a little bit of comfort that, it was like the highest, he said it was the highest mitzvah to help save a person's life. And that made sense to us. And, why wouldn't we want to help someone else survive? But yet we were also in this total and complete shock that our daughter, our oldest daughter, wasn't going to survive and was basically considered legally brain dead. So right around that same time, our 12-and-a-half-year-old daughter, Sarah, who had been out of the room talking to some social workers, I believe. We had two younger daughters, Sarah, who was 12 at the time, and Rachel, who was 9. And so Sarah, our 12-and-a-half-year-old, came in, and right in the same conversation, she said to us, Mom and Dad, why wouldn't you donate Laura's organs if they could save someone's life? And so here we were looking at our healthy daughter who had just lost her older sister, who was pleading with us to make the decision to donate her organs. And that really helped push us over to say yes. And I think we would have done it anyway, but between our rabbi, between what we believed organ donation to be in terms of generous and noble concept, and our other daughter, asking us to do this, we said yes. And then we had to decide which organs and whether we wanted to donate her brain and her spinal cord to science, and whether we were wanting to do tissue and her corneas. And it was very confusing to try to figure these things out when we were in this state of shock. But it gave us this like small ray of hope that maybe something could come good out of something that was seemingly so senseless. We couldn't even comprehend what had happened, to be truthful. So at the end of the day, we said that we would allow her internal organs to be donated. She was only 14 and a half, so she hadn't even had the opportunity to go to the DMV and get her license and make that decision herself, whether she wanted to be an organ donor. We had talked to her about a lot of adult topics. but I don't ever remember talking to her about her feelings on organ donation. And the reality is she was a minor anyway, and so the decision ended up being on my husband and I to make the ultimate decision. But we know that Laura was a very huggy, generous, kind person, and I think, and I'm pretty sure that she would be really so thrilled with what happened and the meaning that we've taken out of our saying yes to donation. So, fast forward, we left the hospital later that afternoon, probably 6 or 7 o'clock at night, after the organ procurement coordinator told us that a match had been made for her liver, and it was a very special story, and it was going to go to someone in New York. That's all we could learn about at the time because of confidentiality. So we left the hospital. The organ was going to be transplanted early Sunday morning and flown out to New York. So we left to go back home and be with our other two daughters and start the grieving process and start um, and planning for her funeral, which was that following Monday. So she was declared legally brain dead on Saturday, February 21st. We agreed to donate her organs, and the Organ Donation Network did everything they could to make sure that her funeral could happen just 2 days later on that Monday. Um, so my husband kept in touch with the organ donation coordinator, and he he really wanted to learn as much as he could about what was happening. And we did find out that Laura's liver went to a woman in upstate New York. And 3 months later, we received um, a snail mail letter with some of the pieces of the letter blacked out to take away any identifying information. And this woman told us how grateful she was that she had received the liver, that she was a special ed teacher, she was recovering well, and she was very grateful that she was given a second chance of life and that she wanted to hopefully keep in touch with us. And so that letter had come from the New York donor network through the Wisconsin donor network to us. And then we could do the same thing, writing back letters that would go through Wisconsin, then to New York, and then to her. So it was like a laborious process at the beginning, until we signed all the paperwork to take away the confidentiality. And 18 months to the day that we rushed Laura to the hospital, we received, I went to the mailbox and had a white envelope that had um, Patricia Lynn O'Neill's name, address, and phone number um, on this white sheet of paper. And we knew that we could then contact her and start that process of potentially getting to know her and keeping connected. So that night, when the girls came home from school and Ron came home from work, we started Googling her name, and we found out that we found a couple of YouTube clips. Maybe I think it was a local news story about the donation. And then my daughter Sarah, the 12 and a half year old who had convinced us, said that she wanted to call Trish that night. And it was a little bit unnerving because as a mom, I so wanted this relationship to go well. And here, part of my daughter, Laura, her liver was in someone else. And um, I was thrilled that her liver had saved someone's life. And I felt this strong connection um, to this person, but wanted to make sure that the relationship turned out well. So we came home from dinner that night. We got on different receivers of the phone all around the house. we had landline at the time, and my husband called, and almost within minutes we got on the phone with Trish, and she just had tears in her voice, and she started talking to our girls and was able to just express her gratitude, and we just had a really lovely conversation. Probably 10, 15 minutes, where she told us that she owned a gym, she was feeling healthy. She explained that she had been in a 10-day liver-induced coma, and that Laura's liver truly saved her life. Like, she was hours away from dying. And we were, it was just the nicest conversation. And when we hung up the phone, I remember our daughters came running down the stairs and started dancing in the kitchen. So happy to have talked to Trish and to know that Laura's liver had saved the life of a woman, that our decision on that worst day of our life was created some meaning in something that otherwise we couldn't hold on to anything. And so, over the last 17 years, we've continued this relationship with Trish, which is really very special to us. And we know it's not completely common to have that blessing, and to have that ability to connect with the recipient and the donor family, to keep that relationship going, or even ever get to know who that person is. But for us, this relationship has been really healing, and knowing that Laura's life really keeps bearing beauty in it, and that Trish is a wonderful steward for Laura's life and legacy. And um, we've been able to talk about Laura more through the donation, because it gives people like goosebumps when you tell the story. When you, instead of just always talking about the sadness of losing Laura, we could talk to friends and family and tell them, did you hear Laura's liver saved the life of this woman in New York? And when you tell the story, it just raises it makes people feel so good that organ donation can cause such a miracle. So we feel very fortunate to be part of this kind of circle of life. But in the past 17 years, I've spoken to lots of different organ donation groups and book clubs and different hospital environments, and I've met a number of transplant recipients. And what I've been kind of surprised to learn, but I guess I understand it, is this: there's this feeling that some people have told me of, like a feeling of guilt that they were able to live, but the person that passed away, didn't. And I understand that, but I also, like, I understand that the two events are kind of cosmically related, and we're always going to be related in some special way to Trish, because she has Laura's liver in her. Um, but the two events didn't cause one another. So Laura would have died no matter what. And if we had decided to say no to organ donation, she would have been buried with her organs intact, and Trish most likely would have died. But because we said yes, we had this opportunity, and Laura had this opportunity to basically keep living in someone else, and to save someone else's life. And for us, we just want all good for Trish, and we want that relationship to be as natural as possible, even though it's the most extraordinary. It's not an ordinary relationship, it's an extraordinary one. And but we're so thrilled that she's healthy and doing well. And so we really do feel like we helped save the life of a person by really kind of a split second decision on the worst day of our life. And we want all good things for Trish. And we know that if Trish hadn't lived, her entire family, her siblings, her parents, her extended family, her friends, they all would have suffered the same type of loss that we suffered when Laura passed away. And all the grief and the despair and the angst that we suffered, they would have had to suffer as well. And we just feel very fortunate to have been able to to say yes and create a miracle. Um, so I actually, I mean, I wrote a book called Permission to Thrive, and I published it 5 years ago now. It's almost 6 years ago in January. So in January of 2019, I published Permission to Thrive, and it's a book about the grief that we experienced with Laura. We I decided I really needed to write a book because not only did we have the grief and all the insights that we learned through that grief process, I had my own pretty serious medical issue myself. I actually had a benign brain tumor that was completely unrelated to Laura's, the craziest kind of situation, but I obviously recovered fine. Mine was benign, whereas Laura's was a medulloblastoma, which was a cancerous, very rare childhood brain tumor. So I decided to write the book because we had the grief story. We had this crazy brain tumor story of mine, and then we had this organ donation story that had such a kind of a positive outcome for Trish and her family. And just to be able to talk about the lessons we learned and about not only the grief that we experienced, the resilience that we have built over the last 17 years, and and lastly, the growth that has come from experiencing such kind of traumatic and tragic events. I just felt like people need to understand that everyone goes through challenging times and that through dealing with the emotions surrounding them and only through confronting the and struggling with the emotions can you kind of get to a different level of growth. And I learned about this topic called post-traumatic growth, and it's a topic that I had never heard the words post-traumatic growth before, but I kind of understood what they meant because it's sort of the opposite of post-traumatic stress disorder. And it means that when people go through traumatic or significant loss, a significant portion of people will gain some wisdom or growth through the event. It's sort of like a silver lining, but it's not a Pollyannish concept. It means that you learn things, you gain deeper friendships, you are more open to spirituality, you perhaps appreciate life more, understand the fragility of our lives here, have more compassion, all those types of things that when I thought about them, they had happened to our family and to me over the last many years. And I thought it was a really optimistic universal kind of message to share with people. It doesn't mean that everyone experiences the same types of feelings that I did. It doesn't mean that people have them at the same time or to the same extent. But for myself, I still believe that we're doing okay after Laura's death, and not only okay, but better than okay. And I had to kind of give myself permission to kind of thrive even after such traumatic situations. So I think that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. That's one of the reasons love talking about the organ donation story. I love talking about the takeaways that we've learned about grief and how you just have to really ask for what you need when you're grieving, when you're experiencing life's ups and downs. Um, I've really learned a lot about how to show up for people that you care about, that's so important. And so I really feel blessed to be able to talk to groups like this who are doing such great things with the transplant community, with promoting organ donation. And I really welcome anyone to reach out to me if you're interested in learning more about what I do and where I speak, and um, or just want to talk about my book. So thank you so much for listening, and I am I really wish all of you health and happiness, and I'm so happy that organ transplant has proven to be such a positive in your life, and I appreciate everything that you're doing to advocate for organ donation. So thanks so much.